My name is Shelby Farrow. At 33 years old, I had already completely paid off the college degree my father constantly bragged about funding. He called me on a Tuesday, his voice carrying that usual arrogant tone, like he was doing me a massive favor just by remembering my phone number. He demanded I attend my sister Chloe's wedding, threatening to cut off my tuition fund if I refused. He honestly believed the worst thing that could happen to me was missing a party. But what I discovered in the groom's paperwork 3 days later changed everything. My dad never asked what I did for a living. If he had, he might have hung up that phone a lot more carefully. You and I are about to look at exactly what happens when the quiet one finally speaks up. If stories about healthy boundaries, personal dignity, and justice served cold are why you are here, drop a comment and subscribe. Let me take you back to that Tuesday. I was sitting in my office on the 31st floor of a high-rise on Wacker Drive, staring at a massive spreadsheet that would decide whether a prominent local business owner got to keep his entire company. See, I am a forensic accountant. My job is to find the hidden lies buried deep inside the numbers. I had a corner desk, 2 monitors, and a contract glowing on my screen worth more than the house my father owned outright. He did not know any of this. He had no clue I had finished my master's degree 6 years ago, top of my class, or that I had cleared every cent of my student loans. He knew absolutely none of it, because I had long since stopped telling him anything about my life. There is a very specific, heavy kind of silence that grows inside a household when one child learns that speaking up only invites constant criticism and correction. I had completely stopped explaining myself to my parents somewhere around my 25th birthday. At the time, I proudly told myself it was about maintaining my dignity. But looking back, it was mostly just pure exhaustion. When his name lit up my glowing phone screen that afternoon, I almost let it ring out. I wish I could say I had a brilliant reason for picking up. The truth is, I answered it the way you press on an old bruise, just to see if it still hurts. To understand why I shut down, you have to go back to Dabney, Indiana, when I was 9 and Chloe was 7. That was the year my sister contracted rheumatic fever, leaving her with a damaged heart valve and requiring a specialist 2 hours away in Indianapolis. For one whole summer, our entire house held its breath around her. My mother slept upright in a wooden chair by her bedside. My father took a second grueling shift at the factory to cover the medical bills. When he got home, he went straight to her room, and the rest of us learned to be invisible so she could rest. Chloe eventually got better and grew up healthy, but the house never exhaled. The habit of putting her at the absolute center of our universe had set like concrete. I became the other kind of child, the one who did not need anything, the one who quietly swept up the wrapping paper and cleaned up after the celebrations. I vividly remember my mother's signature lemon sheet cake at every birthday and holiday, that bright yellow rectangle sitting in the middle of the dining table. I was always the one who scraped the dirty plates and scrubbed the pans in the sink while everyone else sat cozy in the living room with Chloe. I did not actually resent the cake, though. In fact, I learned to love the kitchen. It was peaceful there, and silence was the one thing I could always count on. I left because staying meant slowly disappearing, and I was not about to let myself fade away. When he called me that Tuesday, my father did not even say hello. He never does. He simply announced that the wedding was on the 14th, that the entire town was invited, and that I had better wear something nice so I would not embarrass him. I told him calmly that I would have to check my busy schedule. That was clearly the wrong answer. I heard him slam his coffee mug down onto the counter. He snapped that Chloe had personally asked for me, which I highly doubted, and that my mother was already worried sick I would make an excuse. Then he dropped the threat he had been holding back. He told me to be there, or I could forget about receiving another dime of my college fund. I almost had to laugh at how little he knew. I could have pointed out that I had just billed more in one single quarter than he had earned in 2 full years at the manufacturing plant. Instead, I went completely still, adopting the same quiet mask I use when a fraudulent client lies to my face and I decide to let them keep digging their own grave. I asked him what time I should arrive. No anger, no fight. He paused, clearly thrown off because a screaming match was exactly what he had wanted. He recovered, barked out the address, and hung up. As I sat there listening to the dial tone with the city humming far below, I realized he thought he had won. But he had actually given me a reason to drive to Dabney with my eyes wide open, especially since he mentioned the groom was helping him with cash. I grew up in a white 2-story house off County Road 9, with a squeaky aluminum screen door that banged shut behind you no matter how carefully you closed it. That metallic bang was the soundtrack of my childhood. My father bought that property the year I was born and paid the very last note on it the year I left for college. I vividly remember the day the mortgage was gone. He took my mother to dinner, came home, and stood on the lawn like a king, surveying his kingdom. He looked at us and declared that nobody could ever take this place away from us now. The house was free and clear, the ultimate proof of his success. I want you to hold on to that image because everything that unfolded later turns entirely on that deed. A house with absolutely no debt on it is a safe, comforting thing. But it is also a highly tempting target if you are the kind of predator who knows how to sneakily put debt back onto a property without the aging owner quite realizing what papers he is signing. I did not know that yet. As I drove south on the interstate 2 days early, clutching a thermos of bitter gas station coffee and nursing a bad feeling I could not quite define, I just knew that squeaky screen door would bang when I arrived. My father would be standing there, proud of his home, and somewhere nearby would be his new favorite helper, Cole Mercer. He had made himself incredibly useful to my parents lately, and in my line of work, overly helpful men make me very nervous. The drive from Chicago to Dabney takes about 5 hours, giving me too much time to reflect on the last real fight my father and I had 6 years ago, at a dinner meant to celebrate my master's degree. He spent the entire meal asking Chloe about her life, completely ignoring me. When my mother finally brought up my accomplishment, my father just nodded coldly and said that Chloe was the one who actually stayed. He said it as if staying was some grand virtue, and leaving to build a successful career out of state was a betrayal. I did not argue with him that night. I simply drove home, signed a lease on my own luxury apartment, and decided the version of me that begged for his approval was officially dead. Walking away silently takes real strength. I was never actually angry at Chloe. For the record, you cannot be angry at someone just because they were fiercely protected. Honestly, I felt something closer to grief whenever I looked at her. She had been wrapped in so much bubble wrap as a sick child that she never truly learned how to stand on her own 2 feet. She ended up marrying the very first man who told her she was special. That dependency should have absolutely terrified my parents, but instead, it thrilled them. By the time my car crossed the state line into Indiana, the sun was going low and orange over the endless cornfields. I tried to convince myself that I was just attending a normal family wedding. I almost believed it, until my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. My mother's text was filled with breathless gratitude about Cole. Cole had fixed the gutters. Cole had found my dad a better return on his savings. Cole knew a guy who could refinance the truck. After 12 years of doing forensic accounting, the word return stopped sounding like good news to me. A stranger who suddenly has a connection for every financial issue is a massive red flag. Helpful is the most expensive thing in the world when it comes from someone who wants something. I texted back a polite, neutral reply. Then, sitting in that quiet gas station parking lot off Route 9, I opened my laptop on the passenger seat and typed Cole Mercer's full name into the very first of 3 secure databases I subscribe to. Cole Mercer, entrepreneur. That was the grand title my mother used. But I have learned to be suspicious of men who need adjectives to define themselves. Sitting in my car, waiting on an agonizingly slow gas station data connection, I watched that little loading wheel spin. I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid, that maybe some guys are genuinely just good with gutters. But then the first record loaded. A business entity registered only 8 months ago right here in Indiana. Clean on the surface, but the address listed was not an office. I knew that street. It was just a mailbox storefront in a strip mall, the kind that rents you a fake suite number and a place to hide. A real company has a real door. I snapped my laptop shut. I had a wedding to get to, but now I had a question to carry into it. Let me be clear about one thing, because it matters for everything that follows. I did not drive to Indiana to play detective. I drove because a leash was rattled at me, because a stranger was suddenly handling my father's money, and because I am physically incapable of leaving a mismatched number alone. My mother raised a girl who scrapes the plates. The world turned her into a woman who reconciles the accounts. I pulled into our gravel driveway just after 9 that night. The old screen door banged shut. My father looked up from his recliner, surprised to see me early, and for half a second, a flicker of pleasure crossed his face before he remembered to be gruff. My mother hugged me far too tight, and there on the couch, wearing a sweater that cost more than the couch itself, sat Cole Mercer. He stood up immediately when I walked in, shaking my hand with both of his and looking me dead in the eye. He was warm, polished, and completely practiced. The kind of man who has shaken a lot of hands he intends to empty. He told me my sister was lucky to have a big sister like me, and I just smiled and said the right things. Inside, every alarm I own was going off quietly, like a smoke detector chirping in a distant room. He was too smooth. He held eye contact a beat too long. And when my dad bragged about the house being paid off, Cole said, "A property like this is an asset you should be making work for you, Ray." Making it work. I had heard that exact phrase before, spoken in depositions by men who were no longer free. I went to bed in my childhood room and lay wide awake doing math in my head. By morning, I had stopped wondering if I should look. I was only wondering how deep it went. I told my family I had work calls and shut the door to the spare room. That part was actually true. I set up my laptop on the old desk where I used to do homework nobody asked about, and I pulled out a plain green folder, the kind I buy 100 at a time. I write on the tabs in pencil so I can reuse them. On this one, I wrote a single name, Mercer. Then I went to work the way I would for any client, because the people I love deserve the same rigor I give to total strangers. First, that brand new company with the mailbox address. I pulled the filing, and Cole was listed as the sole officer and agent at that same fake suite. Only 8 months old, and according to my mother, this company was already managing my father's investments. A real investment firm has licenses and active registration with the State Securities Division. I checked. There was absolutely nothing. Not suspended, not pending, nothing. A person cannot legally manage other people's money for a return without registering. Cole had registered nothing, but a post office box. That alone was not proof of a crime. People cut corners, but it was a massive red flag. The first of what I suspected would be a long row of them, and red flags are my entire profession. I made a quick note in the folder in my small square handwriting. Then I did what I always do next to separate a hunch from a finding. I started looking for what came before. You see, men like Cole are rarely first-time builders. They are repeat performers who dissolve one stage and walk on to the next. I just had to find the stage before this one. It took me most of the morning, and what I found made me close the folder and sit very still. Before we look at those findings, let me tell you about what was happening downstairs. Around noon, I went to the kitchen for coffee and caught the end of a conversation that stopped dead the moment I walked in. My mother had her checkbook out, and my father was signing a document Cole had slid across the table. Cole gathered it up before I could read the letterhead. "Just some paperwork for the refinance," Cole said smoothly, tucking it away. "It is saving your folks a fortune, Shelby." My father beamed. My mother beamed right along with him. I poured my coffee, watching a con man effortlessly pour out his cheap charm. I asked, keeping my tone as light and casual as possible, what they were refinancing since the house was already paid off. Immediately, the temperature in the room dropped. My father's jaw set. "Grown-up business," he muttered, a defensive phrase that told me he did not understand any of it himself. I let it go in the room, but I did not let it go in my head. Later that afternoon, when we were alone, I asked my mother how their savings were doing. She got vague. There had been some moving around. Money shifted into Cole's fund to get it growing. Sudden, massive movements in bank accounts that had sat completely untouched and steady for 30 years. In my line of work, that financial pattern has a specific name, and that name is definitely not a good return. But I did not lecture her. Lecturing a woman who has decided to be happy only forces her to defend the very thing that is hurting her. I just filed the information. The green folder was getting thicker. The picture forming inside was not of a clumsy son-in-law making rookie mistakes. It was a highly practiced, patient sequence run by someone who knew exactly which buttons in a proud family to press. I had to be careful because he was watching me, too. That evening, I tried a soft approach. I sat with my father on the porch as the crickets started up, suggesting gently that we should have an independent eye look over Cole's unregistered company. I offered to do the audit myself, quietly and for free. I watched my father's face close up like a shop front at midnight. "You have been here for exactly 1 day," he snapped, "and you are already trying to ruin everything." He told me Cole had done more for this family in 6 months than I had done in 6 long years. He said I was jealous of Chloe and her happiness, and bitter that someone had finally brought money into this family instead of keeping it all to themselves up in Chicago. That last part hit me hard. I will not pretend it did not hurt. I had kept my life to myself, and now my quiet independence was being read as pure selfishness. My mother stood in the doorway, the screen door on her hip, and I looked at her, waiting for her to say something true. My mother had known me for 33 years. She had watched me scrape every plate, yet she just looked down at the porch boards and said, "Let us just have a nice wedding, Shelby." Even with her, especially with her, I did not raise my voice. I have learned that yelling at people who have decided you are the problem only proves their point. So I just said, "Okay." I told her I hoped it worked out, and then I went upstairs. I opened that green folder and returned to the only language that has ever told me the truth. Numbers do not get embarrassed. They do not choose favorites. They just sit there, waiting for someone willing to read them. The next morning, I caught Chloe alone at the kitchen table, addressing the last of the wedding place cards in her careful, looping handwriting. For a moment, she was just my little sister again, tongue between her teeth as she worked hard on something small. I sat down beside her. I did not lead with Cole's company. I simply asked if she was happy. Her face lit up as she told me she had never been happier, that Cole truly understood her and made her feel chosen for the first time in her life. That word stopped me cold. Chosen. The girl around whom our entire family had revolved had grown up feeling unchosen. A stranger had figured out exactly how to fill that void. They always do. They listen for the empty room inside of you, and then they move right in and pay no rent. I tried carefully to ask what she knew about Cole's business and his past and where he lived before. Her face changed instantly. The shutters came down, and behind them, I heard Cole's voice in her words. "He told me you would do this," she said. "He said you could not stand to see me have something for once." He had inoculated her against me before I had even arrived. He had predicted the big sister who notices things and turned my noticing into proof of my jealousy. It was brilliant work. Honestly, I have watched professionals do worse. I reached across the table, squeezed her hand, and told her I loved her and would always be in her corner no matter what. She let me hold her hand just long enough to feel guilty, then pulled it back to finish the cards. I left the kitchen knowing two things. Chloe was not my enemy, and she was not going to be any help. I was on my own, which was nothing new. Late that night, it was my mother who almost broke. I went downstairs for water and found her alone at the counter, her hands pressed flat against the cold tile, staring at nothing. She did not hear me at first. When she did not put on her bright face. She looked exhausted in a way I had not allowed myself to see. "Shelby," she said softly, "you know, I always knew." I stood very still. "Knew what, Mom?" She spun her wedding ring around her finger and whispered that it was not fair how things went. After Chloe got sick, she was terrified all the time, and I was just so easy. Her mouth worked, and for a second the wall came down. I saw 30 years of my life in her face. Every scraped plate, every birthday in the kitchen. All of it known and never said. I did not move. I wanted that sentence finished more than I had wanted anything in years. But then, a floorboard creaked out in the dark hallway, and my father's heavy voice came drifting in, asking what she was doing up so late. Right before my eyes, my mother's face just closed up. She patted my arm, her hand trembling slightly, and whispered for me to go on to bed because there was a big day coming. Just like that, the moment folded itself away like an old letter slipped back into a dark drawer. She chose peace. She chose it the way she had chosen it my entire life, because quiet was the only thing she knew how to make, while fairness was a language she never learned. I won't lie and say I forgave her right then. I did not. But I understood her, which is a much colder, far more useful thing. I went back upstairs where the folder was waiting under the dim lamp. This is the part I keep coming back to, the page that turned a bad feeling into a hard, undeniable fact. I had spent 2 days chasing Cole Mercer backward through public records, only for him to keep dead-ending because his paper trail was barely 8 months old. A grown man with zero history before last spring is not humble. He is hiding. I stopped searching his name and started searching the patterns, the registered agent addresses, mailbox filings, and a specific strip mall suite. That suite finally gave him to me. 2 years before Cole existed, that exact address hosted another entity 1 state over, now dissolved and gone. And the officer listed on that dead company was not Cole Mercer. His real name was Cole D. Halverson. Same first name, same middle initial, and the exact same date of birth on the official filing. He probably never imagined the daughter of some stranger would go digging this deep. When I pulled the thread on Halverson Capital Group, I found a dissolved company, 2 official complaints, and a devastating trail of innocent people who had handed over their life savings for a better return, only to get a sob story instead. I printed the page. The ancient printer in the spare room wheezed it out, warm to the touch, and I held it under the desk lamp, reading it 3 times. Sure, changing your name is not a crime, but doing all this while managing a retired couple's money without a license? He was not running from a bad marriage. That man is running a route he has run before. I slid the warm page into the green folder, right on top where I would see it first. That single sheet became the spine of everything. From that night forward, every move I made had that name underneath it, Halverson. The wedding was only 4 days away, and a name like that tells you exactly what kind of monster you are dealing with. The next records I found showed me what he was doing to us right now. I went to the county property office the next morning to pull the deed to my father's house, the one I grew up believing was completely bulletproof, free, and clear. But there it was, a brand new lien, a home equity line of credit drawn against the 30 years of hard work my father had poured into that dirt. The lender on the paperwork was an unfamiliar company. I ran its name through the state corporate database and my paid search tools, watching it trace back through a shell company directly to Cole's unregistered investment fund. This was the brilliant refinance he had pitched. I remembered him sliding those papers across our kitchen table, whispering about saving my folks a fortune, while my father beamed and blindly signed his name on the dotted line. Cole had not saved them a dime. He had mortgaged the one sacred thing my father swore could never be taken, routing that equity straight into his own pocket. Now, the only thing standing between him and the money was a few more signatures and a wedding that would tie him to our family forever. I sat in my hot car outside the county office, feeling the terrifying shape of his scheme click into place. The wedding was never the point. It was the lock. If he marries the favorite daughter, he becomes a son, and a proud father completely stops asking hard questions. I started the engine and drove back toward the house. I was an hour outside of Dabney, pulling secret records my family had no idea existed. On the way, I made one crucial stop at the county recorder to request certified copies with official seals. If they were going to call me bitter or jealous, I wanted proof they could not wave away. The screen door banged shut behind me as I walked inside, the exact same sound I had heard my whole life. But now I knew the ruin hanging over us. That familiar bang of the screen door used to mean safety. Now, it just sounded like a countdown. My father was sitting on the porch with Cole, the two of them laughing heartily. My dad had his hand draped over Cole's shoulder as if the perfect son he had always wanted had finally arrived. Meanwhile, I was carrying certified records of a secret lien in my bag and evidence of a dissolved company under a fake name. I had to walk right past that happy scene and smile. So I did. I am good at the long game. I have sat across tables from powerful men who knew I was building the case to destroy them. And I learned long ago how to keep my face as still as glass. As I walked up the porch steps, Cole watched me, a cold, new wariness flickering behind his eyes. He had clearly noticed that I was the only one in this house who did not melt when he walked into the room. He asked me if I had finished all my work calls, trying to fish for information. I just smiled and told him it was always more numbers, giving him absolutely nothing. That night, I organized my folder like an exhibit for court. The registration page with the Halverson name, the certified lien, the state security search, the fake mailbox address. Every single page was clean, sourced, and stamped with official county seals. I was done arguing with my father. I was going to do the only thing I had ever been good at in this family. I was going to lay the cold truth flat on the table, let them look at it, and decide what kind of people they wanted to be. I gave them a fair chance first. I owe you that detail because it really matters. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I asked my parents to sit down with me at the kitchen table, just the three of us. I opened the folder. I kept my voice gentle. I did not use the words con man. I simply told them I had found some things they absolutely needed to look at before any more of their money was transferred. I laid out the certified lien on their home. I showed them the unlicensed company, and then I turned over the page with the name Halverson. I carefully explained that the man marrying my sister had used a different name when his last company collapsed and left people broke. My father did not read a single word. He just stared at the papers like trash I had dragged in. He looked up and said, "So this is what you drove all the way down here for." He did not care about the money or the lien on his beloved house. He only cared that I had gone looking. He told me I just could not bear to let my sister have one good thing. My mother slowly picked up the Halverson paper and held it. For one fleeting second, I thought she might actually see the truth. I thought the sentence she left hanging at the counter nights ago might finally finish itself. But then she set the paper face down. "People change their names, Shelby," she said quietly. "I changed mine when I married your father." And that was it. They owned the house and held the accounts. Every legal shield ran through their signatures, and they had decided to keep signing. I could not close bank accounts that were not mine, nor could I unwind a lien on a house I did not own. The law that protected their independence was the very thing that left them wide open to ruin. I closed the folder. "Okay," I said simply, though I meant something entirely different than what they heard. Now, you might think I should have called the police right then, or screamed the truth at the rehearsal dinner, or grabbed my sister and shaken her until she woke up. I get the urge, believe me. But in my line of work, I know what happens when you strike too early. The Marks will actively defend their predator, and you instantly become the jealous villain who ruined the wedding. Throwing proof at people who are not ready for it is just throwing confetti. So I made the colder, much smarter choice. I completely stopped trying to rescue people who had made it crystal clear that they did not want to be rescued. Instead, I focused entirely on the only thing I actually had control over: my own actions. Late that night, I called a trusted lawyer friend back in Chicago and walked her through every piece of paper I had gathered. I asked her the hard technical questions. I needed to know the line between protecting my family and exposing myself to a dangerous man who knew exactly how to weaponize a signature. She warned me to stay strictly in the lane of facts. "Do not allege fraud, Shelby," she said. "You are not the jury. Just present what is verifiable and let the records do the talking." That was a language I already knew. I had built my entire career on the sharp line between saying this is a crime and saying these are the facts, and they raise questions any reasonable person would want answered. I went to sleep that night feeling calmer than I had in a week. Not because the problem was solved, but because I had stopped fighting the current and started reading it. The wedding was going to happen, and the money was set to move on the big day, with my father's pen poised and ready. I knew exactly when to lay the truth on the table, and not a second before. The rehearsal dinner was the first time my family got a glimpse of the person I had actually become, but they looked right past it. It started during the salad course at the only decent restaurant in town when my phone began to ring. I stepped out to the quiet parking lot to take the call. It was a managing partner at a firm I consult for, calling about a 9-figure settlement that hinged on my testimony. Hundreds of millions of dollars of other people's money were on the line, and they needed my final read before Monday. I spoke with the same quiet, sharp precision I always use at work, but when I returned, my aunt pried. "Just work," I shrugged. My father snorted. "Bean countin'," he joked, drawing easy chuckles. Only Cole did not laugh. He was starting to do some silent math of his own about me. The rest of them just filed me away as Shelby and her little numbers, the daughter with the small life up north, and went back to toasting the groom. I let them. There is a rare kind of freedom in being completely underestimated by people who refuse to truly look. My family builds their entire picture of me out of a child I stopped being 20 years ago, and they never bother to update the file. I sat back down next to an empty chair because nobody thought to seat me near the main table, eating my dinner while I watched Cole work the room like a man closing a sale. He raised his glass to my parents, calling my father Dad for the first time, and my father's eyes went wet with it. This stranger was handing him the warmth his own daughter supposedly withheld. I felt the trap close one more inch, quietly doing the math on the timing behind my still pawned face. 2 days later, my folder was ready, and so was I. The rehearsal was at the church, and afterward, everyone came back to the house for dessert. My mother had made her signature lemon sheep cake. Of course, it was the same bright yellow rectangle from every milestone of my life, sitting in the center of the dining table like a small sun. People gathered around. Chloe cut the first piece, laughing, with Cole's arm around her waist, while my father made a short speech about family and how this was just the beginning. I stood at the edge of the room by the kitchen doorway, the exact spot I have occupied my entire life, the spot with the best view of the dishes that would need washing. Nobody handed me a plate. Nobody thought to. It did not hurt anymore. It was just like watching a rerun of a show I had memorized. But then Cole found me in the doorway, drifting over with a glass of wine and that easy, polished smile. He leaned in close enough that only I could hear. "You're the smart one," he said. "You do taxes, asset structuring, all that," Cole muttered, swirling his wine. "Hypothetically, if a guy wanted to move some property out of a couple's name, keep it clean, and gift it to the kids before the wedding for tax reasons, what is the smartest way?" He was fishing. He wanted to know exactly how much I understood, whether I was a real threat or just a sour sister. I looked at him over the lemon cake my mother made, feeling a deep, cold calm settle inside me. "Oh, I am not really a tax person," I said, light as air. "I mostly just find things." He held my eyes a second too long, then smiled wider and walked back to his bride. He knew. And now I knew he knew. After everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the dark spare room and put the final piece of the puzzle in place. Cole's question by the cake had told me far more than he meant to. Gift it to the kids before the wedding. He was not finished. The lien was drawn and the money was moving, but he wanted the house itself, transferred while my father was glowing, grateful, and least likely to read the fine print. There was only one perfect moment for that: the wedding day. A man like Cole understands major occasions. On that day, my father would be soft, proud, full of champagne and the joy of finally having his perfect family picture. Slide a gift deed in front of him between the ceremony and the cake, call it a tax-smart wedding present, and he would sign his own house away, thinking he was being generous. The reception was going to be the exact moment he made his move. I confirmed what I could, tracing the Halverson Trail one state further. There it was, the exact same pattern. A property pulled from an older couple for the kids 18 months before his company dissolved. Then, Cole Halverson vanished. He was not improvising. He was running a script he had executed at least twice before, which meant I did not have to guess his next line. I knew it. And knowing a man's next move is the only real power there is. I laid the green folder out one final time on the desk. The Halverson page, the certified lien, the empty securities registration, and the matching pattern from another state. Clean, sealed, sourced, and undeniable. I closed the folder and set it quietly beside the simple dress I had hung on the closet door. Tomorrow I would carry both the dress and the folder to the wedding. One of them was going to do a lot more than the other. I slept for only 4 hours and woke up steady. That surprised me. I thought I would be a wreck, knowing I was about to lay my family open in front of 200 guests. But I have done versions of this before, in rooms with stenographers, and the body learns the difference between fear and focus. This was focus. I dressed early in simple navy, nothing that asked for attention. I did the thing I always do before walking into a room that matters. I rehearsed the facts out loud, quietly, until they were smooth. The company is not registered. Here is the search. There is a lien on the house. Here is the certified copy. He used another name 2 years ago. Here is the filing. Each sentence was true and provable on its own, impossible to dismiss as one bitter woman's story. My lawyer's voice was in my head. Don't allege, don't perform. Lay it down and let it sit there. I knew the temptation would come when my father said something cruel. The urge to fire back and finally say what I had swallowed for 33 years. I promised myself I wouldn't. Real power is not the loudest voice in the room. It is the calmest one holding the only thing that is true. I tucked the green folder into a flat leather portfolio so it would not look like an ambush, just a woman with some papers. I checked the certified seals, caught myself in the mirror, navy dress, steady hands, and thought of the little girl who scraped plates while the family laughed in the next room. I was not doing this to win her a seat at the table. She had stopped wanting that seat years ago. I was doing it because the house she grew up in was about to be stolen, and I was the only one in the family who could actually read the theft. I have sat across the table from people who lie for a living, and the hardest part was never the numbers. The numbers are easy. They always confess. The truly painful part was watching the people I loved choose the lie over and over because the truth cost more than they were willing to pay. If your family ever made you the villain just for noticing what was true, you already know exactly how that feels. Stay with me. The toast is next. There was one more thing before the wedding, and I almost forgot to tell you because it was so perfectly him. That morning, my father caught me in the hallway in his rented suit, looking like a man about to receive an award. He stopped me with a hand on my arm, saying he was glad I had finally shown some sense. Then he warned me to keep my opinions about Cole to myself, that this was Chloe's day and not the Shelby show. And because he could not help himself, he added, "Behave today or that college fund is gone for good." The college fund. The man had a secret lien on his house and a stranger's hand in his savings, yet the leverage he reached for was a pot of money he had spent years ago, threatening a daughter who easily out-earned him before breakfast. I almost laughed. Instead, I just looked at this proud, frightened man in his rented suit and nodded. "I'll behave," I said. And I meant it in my own way. I had no intention of making a scene. Scenes are for people without evidence, and I was going to be the calmest person in that room. He took my nod for surrender, the way he always had, patting my arm before going off to find his cufflinks, satisfied that he had handled me. He thought silence meant I had folded. It actually meant I was finished arguing. There is a huge difference, but he had never learned it because in 33 years, he had never stayed quiet long enough to hear it. I watched him go, picked up my portfolio, checked the seals one last time, and headed to the wedding. The reception was at Linen Hall, a banquet room my parents could not afford, with a massive chandelier my father kept glancing up at like it might fall. 200 guests filled the room, the people whose opinions had run my father's life. There were white tablecloths, a band, and the lemon cake was nowhere to be seen because this was catered. 3 tiers, Cole's taste, Cole's bill, or so everyone assumed. I sat at a back table with the cousins, exactly where they had placed me, and watched Cole move through the room like a man at his own coronation. He was shaking hands, calling my father Dad, looking like he already owned half the building. Then, between dinner and the dancing, it began exactly as I had known it would. Cole stood and tapped his glass, making a charming little speech about family and new beginnings. He said he had a surprise, a gift for the parents who had welcomed him as a son. He produced a leather folio and called my father up to the head table so everyone could witness it. A gift to the next generation, he called it. A smart, clean way to protect the family legacy. He had the papers right there, a deed drawn up in advance and ready for signing. It was the kind of document that needs only an owner's signature and a notary stamp to start a paid-off house sliding out of one family's name and into a hidden structure they would never see. He held a pen in his hand, ready to seal the deal. Cole had my father glowing, reaching for that pen in front of 200 witnesses who would later swear they saw a generous man and a grateful father. The band had stopped. As my father gripped the pen, I stood up from the back table, my portfolio in my hand, and walked toward the head table at an unhurried pace, the way you walk when you are the only one who knows what is about to happen. My father saw me coming and his face curdled. He did not know what I was holding, but he knew I was not supposed to be walking. He covered his panic by performing. "Well, look who decided to join the family," he boomed into the microphone, and the room laughed, warm and oblivious. He gestured at me with the pen. "My older girl lives up in Chicago, too busy with her little numbers to call her mother. But she made it to the wedding, so I suppose we should be grateful," my father said. More laughter rolled through the crowd. He was loose with champagne and the joy of his big day, reaching for the oldest weapon he had. "I had to practically threaten to cut her off to get her here," he boasted. "Be at your sister's wedding," I told her, "or don't expect another dime." The room chuckled at the gruff old father. He thought he was being charming, reciting his leverage in front of 200 people, having no idea he was handing me the room. I stopped a few feet from the table. I did not raise my voice. I have never needed to. "You are right that you threatened me," I said, and the microphone caught my voice because I had stepped close on purpose. "But you got one part wrong, Dad. I never needed your dime." The laughter in the room immediately thinned out. Something in my tone, flat, cold, and certain, told them this was not part of the wedding entertainment. Cole's smile stiffened. My mother's hand went to her throat. My father, sensing the ground shift, did what proud, scared men always do. He doubled down. "Oh, here we go," he sneered. "Go on then, ruin it. You always do." So I did the opposite of ruining it. I opened my portfolio, set a green folder on the white tablecloth right next to his pen, and opened it so they could see. I did not snatch the mic. I spoke in a clear, even voice, and the absolute silence of the room carried my words all the way to the back. "Before anyone signs anything tonight," I said, "I think the family should see a few documents. These are not opinions. They are public records that anyone can pull. I just got there first." I laid down the first page. "This is an official search from the State Division. The fund managing Mom and Dad's savings is completely unregistered. There is no license on file. None." Then I laid down the second page. "This is a certified copy from the county recorder. There is a home equity line of credit drawn against this house. The very house Dad always claimed was paid off, free and clear." A low murmur started moving through the tables like wind through wheat. I laid down the third page, the spine of the entire fraud, and turned it so Chloe could see it clearly. "This is a business filing from 2 years ago," I explained. "One state over, same date of birth, same middle initial, but a different last name. The man you know as Cole Mercer registered a company under the name Cole Halverson. That company dissolved, and the people who gave him their money to manage never got a single dollar back." I looked up. I did not look at my father or Cole. I kept my eyes locked on Chloe. "I am not telling you he is a criminal," I said gently. "I am not the one who decides that. But these are certified facts with official seals, and any reasonable person would want answers before signing a deed." The pen was still in my father's hand. My father was staring at the certified lien with his name on it, the secret debt on his sacred house. And I watched the internal scoreboard he had lived his whole life by go completely dark in his eyes. The room was dead silent, and then Cole made his fatal mistake. He laughed first, that practiced, easy laugh, trying to win back the crowd. "She is just jealous," Cole said, trying to sound smooth. "Her sister is happy and she cannot stand it. These papers are nothing. Anyone can print anything." But I had not printed them. The county and state had, and those gold seals were catching the chandelier light. When his charm failed, Cole did what cornered men always do. He let his mask slip. "You think you are so smart," he spat, his voice climbing. He took a step toward me, pointing his finger. The easy, charming son-in-law was gone, and something ugly stood there in that rented tuxedo. "You could not stand to let her have one good thing. So you cooked up a lie," he yelled. "I did not cook up the state seals, Cole," I replied, keeping my voice quiet and still. The calmer I remained, the louder he got, and the more the room saw him. He turned to my father for backup, but found him staring at the lien. He turned to Chloe, but she was looking at the Halverson page, her face frozen. "Chloe is the one who stayed," my father said suddenly to no one. That old line fell out of him like a reflex, landing in that silent room as the saddest thing a man could ever say. Because we finally understood what staying had cost. Staying had put his favorite daughter directly into this con man's hands. Cole saw the room turning. He saw 200 witnesses, a table full of official seals, and a father who had stopped defending him. So, the practiced grifter made the only move he had left. He set down his pen very carefully, muttered something about needing fresh air, and walked out of Linden Hall through the side door by the kitchen. He did not come back for the cake. He did not come back at all. For a moment, nobody moved. Then everything came apart at once. My mother was crying. Chloe ran after him and came back alone with her veil crooked, and my father sat down heavily in a random chair, holding that certified lien as if he were reading it for the first time. Which he was. And then they all turned to look at me. Of course they did. The daughter, who was too busy with her little numbers, was suddenly the only person in the room who actually understood the numbers. My father looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw him ask me for help. "Shelby," he said, his voice gone small, "what do we do about the house?" This was the moment I had been bracing for, harder than the confrontation itself. The old me, the pleaser, would have dropped everything to fix it, spending herself down to nothing just to buy a place at a table that never had a chair for her. I felt the pull of it. 33 years of habit. I knelt down to be level with him, keeping my voice gentle, because I did not want to be cruel. "I will help you," I said. "But hear me clearly. I will help you on paper and nowhere else." He blinked, confused. "On paper?" "Yes," I replied. "I will bring in the right people, and I will structure a plan so you do not lose the house. Every dollar will be in writing, every term clear, and my name protected." I stood back up. "I am not the family bank, and I am not the family fixer. I am your daughter, and I will act like one on paper with strict boundaries. That is the only help that is real." It was not the warm forgiveness he wanted, but it was something better. It was the only kind of help that does not quietly destroy the person giving it. For once in his life, my father just nodded. Cole was gone within 3 days, along with a chunk of cash. The police took my certified copies in my green folder. They told my parents the exact same things I had told them, only they had badges, which is the only way my father has ever listened to anyone. The house had a very real debt on it now, along with a soured investment and a massive wedding bill for a marriage that lasted exactly 1 reception. I did what I promised. I brought in a trusted lawyer and a colleague, and we built a written plan that let my parents keep their home and work the debt down on terms that protected them and, just as importantly, protected me. No open-ended personal guarantees, no bottomless accounts they could draw from whenever fear got loud. Every dollar was documented. I drove down one last time to walk them through it. The old screen door banged shut when I walked up the steps, same as always, and I stood on the porch a second before going inside. My whole life, that door had marked my return to a home that never quite had room for me. This time, I stood there and understood that I was the one who got to decide whether to walk through it, and on what terms. I opened the door, went inside, and placed the papers on the dining table. Next to those documents was a homemade lemon sheet cake my mother had baked for me. It sat there uncut while we worked through the terms. That bright yellow cake had been present at every milestone of my youth, but this time, it was right in front of my seat. On the dark porch, she finished the sentence she had started a lifetime too late. "It was not fair," my mother said softly. "What we did, how we saw you. I knew it, and I let it happen because it was easier, and I am sorry." She did not ask me to tell her it was okay, and that is how I knew she meant it. It was not a healed wound, but it was a wound finally named out loud by the person who had caused it. That is a different thing, a much truer thing. I told her that I heard her. I told her I would see her at Christmas, refusing to promise any more than that. She did not ask me to. Here's what I know now. The hard lesson it took me 33 years and one ruined wedding to learn. Helping your family is not about proving you are good enough. It is about deciding on your own terms exactly how much of yourself you are willing to spend. So here we are. Mine has a real number now, inked clearly on paper and tucked away. That is my entire story wrapped up in one single folder, one quiet sentence. It took a long time, but my family finally had to learn that my name belongs on the deed of my own life, not theirs. If anyone in your life has ever tried to make you out to be the villain just because you decided to see things clearly, let this be your sign. Write your boundaries down today, before you actually need them. You and I both know how fast things can slip away. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.